Chapter 6. The next morning I woke with my fingers curled around my mother's necklace. The clock in the King Gerald's palace was just striking 6. Perfect. I wanted to rise early and spend the day saying goodbye to the place I loved best. I put my gown over my necklace and crept down to the pantry where I found a tray of freshly baked scones. They were hot, so I tossed 2 in the air and caught them in my skirt, pulling out to make a basket. Then looking down at my breakfast, I ran into the front of the house, right into Father. He was in the entranceway waiting for Nathan to bring the carriage round. I don't have time for you now, Eleanor. Run off and bang into somebody else and tell Mandy I'll be back with the bailiff. We'll need lunch. As instructed, I ran off. Aside from the dangerous aspect, the curse often made me a fool of me and was partly the reason I seemed so clumsy. Now I had to bang into somebody. Bertha was carrying wet laundry. When I bumped into her, she dropped the basket. My gowns and stockings and undergarments tumbled on the tiles. I helped pick them up, but she was going to have to wash everything over again. Little mistress, it's hard enough getting things ready so quick without having to do it twice, she scolded. After I apologized and after I delivered Father's message to Mandy, and after she made me sit down and eat my breakfast on a plate, I started for the royal menagerie just outside the walls of the king's palace. My favorite exhibits were the talking birds and the exotic animals. Except for the hydra in her swamp and the baby dragon, the exotics, the unicorn, the herd of centaurs, and the griffin's family lived on the island meadows, surrounded by an extension of the castle moat. The dragon was kept in an iron cage. He was beautiful in his tiny ferocity and seemed happiest when flaming, his ruby eyes gleaming evilly. I brought a morsel of yellow cheese from the stand next to the cage and toasted it in the fire, which was tricky business, getting close enough for cooking, but not so close that the dragon got a treat. I wonder what King Gerald planned to do with him when he grew up. I also wondered whether I would be home to learn his fate. Beyond the dragon, a centaur stood near the moat, gazing at me. Did centaurs like cheese? I walked towards him quietly, hoping he wouldn't gallop off. Here, a voice said. I turned. It was Prince Charmant offering me an apple. Thank you. Holding out my hand, I edged closer to the moat. The centaur's nostrils flared, and he trotted towards me. I tossed the apple. 2 centaurs galloped over, but mine caught the treat and started eating, crunching loudly. I always expected them to thank me or to say, "How dare you stare?" I said. They're not smart enough to talk. See how blank their eyes are? He pointed, teaching me. I knew all that, but perhaps it was the princely's duty to explain the matter to one subject. If they had words, I said, they wouldn't be able to think of anything to say. A surprised silence followed. Then Char laughed. That's funny. You're funny, as the lady Eleanor was. He looked stricken. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to remind you. I think of her often, I said, most of the time. We walked along the edge of the moat. Would you like an apple too? He yelled at another. I wanted to make him laugh again. I pawed at the ground with my right foot and tossed my head as though I had a mane. Opening my eyes as wide as they go, I stared sillily at Char and took the apple. He did laugh. Then he made an announcement. I like you. I'm quite taken with you. He took a third apple for himself out of the pocket of his cape. I liked him too. He wasn't haughty or disdained or stuffy as a High Chancellor Thomas was. All the Kyrians bowed when we passed, and the visiting elves and gnomes did too. I didn't know how to respond, but Char raised his hand each time and bent at the elbow in the customary royal salute. It was habit, natural to see him as teaching. I decided on a deep nod. Curtsies often tripped me over. We came to the parrot cage, my other favorite place. The birds all spoke all the languages of the earth, human, foreign tongues, and exotic tongues like gnomic, elfin, Orgris, and Agbegi, the language of the giants. I loved to imitate them, even though I didn't know what they were saying. Simon, their keeper, was my friend. When he saw Char, he bowed low. Then he returned to feeding the orange bird. This one's new, he said. Speaks gnomic and doesn't be quiet, and never is quiet. Fogras evek brazier earth yademic yuzi bazi, the parrot said. Fogras yuzier busy earth yamek yuzi brazi, I repeated. You speak gnomic, Char said. I like to make the sounds. I only know a few words mean. She does it just right, doesn't she, Your Highness? Ferbazi, Ezuk, Bizir, Shar gave up. It sounded better when you did it. Ajud de Ej Akchup Aludup, the parrot squawked. Did you know what he said? I asked Simon. When he was able to translate occasionally, Simon shook his head. Do you know, sir? No, it sounded like gargling. Other visits claimed Simon's attention. Excuse me, he said. Shar watched while I said farewell to each bird. Igok Pok Brze Ujiz, the gnomic for until we dig again. Althu sing, ogress for much eating. Ai bak ooh, a biggie for I miss you already. Parole alel peswado, elfin for walk in the shade. I memorized the sight of the birds and Simon. Goodbye, I called. He waved. Lest they be frightened out of their feathers, a garden separated the birds from the ogres. We passed beds of flowers while I tried to teach Shar a few of the words he had just heard. His memory was good, but his accent was unalterably Kieran. If they heard me, the elves would never let me stand under the tree again. The gnomes would hit you over the head with a shovel. Would the ogres decide I was unworthy of consumption? We neared their hut. Even though they were locked in, soldiers were posted within arrow's range, and an ogre glared at us through the window. Ogres weren't dangerous only because of their size and their cruelty. They knew your secrets just by looking at you, and they used their knowledge. When they wanted to be, they were irresistibly persuasive. By the end of an ogre's first sentence in Kieran, you forgot his pointy teeth and the dried blood under his fingernails, and the course of black hair that grew on his face in clumps. He became handsome in your eyes, and you thought him of your best friend. By the end of the second sentence, you were so won over that you could do whatever he wanted you to do, drop you in a pot and to cook you if you were in a hurry to eat you raw. Puzuk aju zek, a soft, lisping voice said. Did you hear that? I asked. Doesn't that sound like an ogre? Where did it come from? Puju azu zek, the voice repeated, this time with a hint of tears in its tone. A toddler gnome poked his head out from the aqueducts, only a few feet from the hut. I saw him at the same moment the ogre did. He could reach the child through the unglazed window. I stared at the boy, but Shar's was quicker. He snatched him up just before the ogre's arm shot out. Shar backed away, holding the youngster who squirmed to get out of his grasp. Give him to me, I said, thinking I might be able to quiet him. Shar handed him over. Z Fawn Nin, the ogre hissed, glaring at Shar. Mine sig z mine chush form. Then he turned to me, and his expressions changed. He started laughing. Me nag si shush hajin imong mine wadzu zizo haj ishif ji. Tears of mirth streaked down his cheeks, leaving the trail of his filthy face. Then he said in Kieran, not bothering to make his voice persuasive, come to me and bring me the child. I stood my ground. Now I had to break my curse. My life and another's depended on it. My knees began to tremble from the need to walk. I held my back and my muscles cramped, shooting the pain in my calves. I squeezed the little gnomes in my effort to resist, and he yelped and twisted in my arms. The ogre continued to laugh, and he spoke again. Obey me this instant. Come now. Against my will, I took a step. I stopped, and the trembling started again. Another step, and then another. I saw nothing except the leering face loom closer and closer.